What's up YouTube, I'm Guy, and on today's episode we're going to take a look at a watch that I've been waiting absolutely ages to get an opportunity to review. So, a big thanks to the viewer of the channel that loaned me this watch and let me try it out for a little while. I really appreciate it. Now of course, what we're talking about is the Sinn 556. In this case, the 556i configuration on Bracelet. The watch also comes in a 556a variation, which is similar to the model we're looking at today, but the dial layout has Arabic numerals. I have to say that for my money, I do very much prefer the model we have here today, if only for the aesthetic differences. So the short answer to the question that's most often asked, which is the 556 worth the money, is in my opinion a resounding yes. Now I'll get more into that towards the end of the video with my closing thoughts, but suffice to say, I am very impressed with this watch. To me, it feels like the next logical step above one of my other favorites, the Hamilton Khaki Field. Similar watches in a lot of ways, both excellent, but the Sinn packs a bit more punch, at, of course, a higher price. Now, I posted a question before doing the review, asking you guys if you had any questions about this watch that I'd try to answer, and I'd go ahead and pick one and address it in the review. Now, Crumply Cowboy asked, is it different enough from the Sinn 104 to justify having both? Well, thanks for the great question, and stick around till the end of the video for my final thoughts, and I will answer that. Alright, YouTube, here we have it, the fantastic Sinn 556i. Just to preface all of this is again the I model. There's another version, which I believe is referred to as the A model, and it has 3, 6, 9, and 12 Arabic numerals on the dial, whereas obviously this one has just the stick markers designating the different hour indices. So, this is what we're dealing with today. Also, this one obviously comes on the bracelet. There's some other strap options as well. By far, this H-Link bracelet is my favorite of the lot, and I am super happy to have it here to show you guys on the channel. So let's get into it. Let's talk about the features, the specifications. I'll give you my opinions on the overall build quality, the style, the design. We'll talk about all of that. But first, let's start with the price. This comes in at $1,320 on the authorized dealer's website here in the United States of America. $1,320 certainly is a lot of money for what is essentially a pretty simple watch. I've had people ask me, how does it compare to something like the Hamilton Khaki Field? And honestly, I think it is a step above the Hamilton Khaki Field. It feels a little bit more robust, a little bit more well-made, for sure, especially once we get into the bracelet and looking at the overall quality of construction there. But yeah, it is a pretty big pill to swallow for people that are generally trying to stick under that $1,000 price point. That's a really common price point. So that they're a hair above that is going to be a bit of a turnoff for some people. That said, I think it is absolutely fantastic, and I would not mind spending a few $100 extra if I was thinking this is the style of watch that I want, but I want to be under a certain price point. I think it is worth it. I think it's fantastic. Now, the overall specifications. Let's talk about the case dimensions. 38.5 millimeters in case diameter, not including, of course, the crown or crown guards, so across the round of the case, 38.5 millimeters. Fantastic size. I love this size on my 6 3/4 inch wrist. We have a lug width of 20 millimeters between the case here where the bracelet attaches, and again, my favorite lug width size, 20 millimeters is fantastic. Overall thickness, 11 millimeters, and it actually looks a little bit thicker than you would think an 11 millimeter watch might look. But honestly, it is fairly low profile to the wrist. No real complaints there. How about that wingspan, the lug-to-lug length from one tip of the case to the other? The most important dimension when it comes to fitting your wrist, in my opinion. You can't beat finding a watch with the correct overall wingspan. The wingspan on this watch is 46 millimeters, or maybe just a hair under, 45 3/4 maybe, close enough to where we would be splitting hairs, then we could call it 46 millimeters. A fantastic size, again, for my wrist size of 6 3/4 inch wrist. If you had a wrist size of 6.5 up to and including 7, maybe 7 1/4, this is going to fit you fantastic. Not too big, not too small. It's right in the Goldilocks zone. I think the overall size and scale of this watch is perfect. So, obviously, I am pretty enthused with this watch. Let's talk about some of the other basic specifications, though. Stainless steel case with bracelet, H-link style bracelet. We'll take a closer look at this bracelet here in a few minutes. AR-coated sapphire crystal. AR coating on the top side and the underside. Very anti-reflective, even pointing it directly into my super bright lights there. Very legible. Legibility is king for me when it comes to a watch. Yeah, I like the style, I like the design, I really pay attention to that. But legibility is probably at a minimum a close second, and this has legibility in spades. Now, of course, we have a screw-down crown, and the case does feature crown guards here. The crown is very nice. We'll take a look at that more closely here in a moment. 200 meters of water resistance. People are going to like that. This thing will hold up to any daily activities you want to throw it to when it comes to water sports. Unless you're a professional saturation diver, you're going to have no problems. It also is low pressure resistant, and frankly, not something that's ever going to come into play for, I'm sure, any of us. Low pressure resistance is when you're at altitude and, in an airplane, basically. If the cabin were to depressurize, you'd have a higher pressure inside the case than outside of the case. So unlike being underwater, where pressure is pushing down on the case, you'd have the pressure in the case pushing out. And that could blow the crystal right out the front of the watch. This is low pressure resistant, should prevent that sort of thing from happening. Now, if I'm in an airplane and it loses cabin pressure, I've got more important things to worry about than whether or not my watch crystal gets blown out. But it is a feature of this watch. I think it's a feature of the majority of watches by Sinn, because they are, by design, by history, by heritage, generally pilots' watches. And we'll talk about that. What style of watch is this? Now, we do have a screw-down case back. We'll take a quick look at that. The screw-down caseback features a exhibition or display caseback window, and it is also sapphire, and it has AR coating on the underside. So even the caseback, sapphire crystal, does have anti-reflective coating on the underside, not the outside. That would get scuffed up way too easily. That's an interesting and frankly a nice feature to have. Something that is a step above the other more common entry-level watches, like the Hamilton Khaki Field that we talked about a few moments ago. The dial. Let's talk about that briefly. It's a glossy black dial, and it features green superluminova glow-in-the-dark luminescence. We'll bring in some video of that later on in the video. I didn't find the lume to be super crazy, blindingly bright, but it is functional. It does work. Last but not least, let's talk about the movement. And as I alluded to in looking at the caseback here, we do have a display caseback, and it does display the SW200-1 Solita movement. It's a 26 joule movement, runs at 28,800 vibrations per hour, features a 38-hour power reserve. Of course, it's hand winding and hacking, and everything that you would want in an automatic movement. All right, so that's the basic specifications. Let's drill in here a little bit closer and talk about what I think about this watch. The fit and finish on the case, and by extension the bracelet, is fantastic, but it is very much of a rugged, kind of durable tool watch presentation, entirely of a brushed finish. It looks outstanding, but it is certainly not dressed up by any stretch of the imagination. It is utilitarian in its design, and I've had people ask me, how would it compare as an alternative to the Rolex Explorer? Well, the Rolex Explorer is very much not a dress watch, obviously, but it is very much a dressier watch than this one, in my opinion, because it features that high polished bezel, because it has the polished case flanks. This doesn't have any of that. That's probably a good thing for a number of reasons. Number one, it probably keeps the cost down, less hand finishing to be done on the case, and frankly, it gives it a more tool watch aesthetic and style. I like that. I think that it's a nice alternative to the Explorer, even though it's certainly not as elegant or dressed up as the Explorer. Now, this case, the geometry of it is just fantastic. If we look at the edges, including the crown and crown guards, everything is just very crisp, very nicely done. The machining on it, I have absolutely no complaints. The overall size scale and proportions is absolutely fantastic. There's really nothing for me to knock about the case of this watch. The bezel, I think, might be a single integrated piece into the case. I'm not sure if it's an additional piece or not. Most bezels are press fit onto the case, even a smooth polished bezel like you would find on the Explorer. I can't exactly tell one way or the other on this one, but it's nicely done. It fits perfectly. There's nothing wrong with it whatsoever. The crown, let's move over here. So the crown guard's very nicely done again. The crown itself, a little bit oversized. It does stand off the case a little bit further than maybe you would prefer. I don't know, it depends on who you are, I guess. I don't have any issues with it. The nice thing about it is because it's a little bit oversized, it's easy to manipulate. You can unscrew the crown quite simply. Once you get out to that first hand winding position, hand winding the SW200 movement, very similar to an ETA movement, is nice. It's fine. The feedback is good. The operation, all right. Pulling it out to the first position gives us a quick set for the date. As you can see here, pulling it out to the next position hacks the movement and lets us set the time as necessary. Screwing the crown back down, a little bit downward pressure, catch those threads, a couple of turns, and you're back in business. You've reinsured your 200 meters of water resistance. The crystal on this watch is a thing of beauty, and I talked about it earlier. Double AR coated, super legible, glossy black dial. The face of this watch is just absolutely outstanding in terms of legibility. The crystal itself, if we look at it in profile, pretty flush with the bezel. Maybe it protrudes just a hair over the bezel, but no, I would say it's pretty flush there. And so you're not going to really risk chipping the edge of your crystal like you see on like a box style crystal that sits proud of the bezel. That's a nice thing because chipping your crystal is frankly annoying, and it ends up adding expense to the cost of ownership of the watch. At some point it will need to be replaced. Probably not going to run into that problem on this watch too much. The air coating, people will complain. Air coating on the outside of a crystal can get scratched up. It can look bad. The owner of this watch doesn't appear to have even the slightest blemish on his crystal. And yeah, I've never had any problems with AR coated crystals either. If you're not careful with it, yeah, it will get scratched up, and you just sort of have to earmark that at some point in the future, when you service the watch, you're also going to have to replace the crystal. It is what it is. It's really not that big of a deal. I would rather have the superb legibility with that AR coating than worry about a few little scuff marks that might appear on the crystal at some point in the future. Maybe. You know what I mean? It's not an issue for me. Overall, I'm just crazy impressed with the crystal, and by extension, impressed with the dial and the handset. Again, ultra legible. The dial is a glossy black dial. I think that because the crystal is so nicely AR coated, it would almost be nice if it was a flat black or satin or matte finish on the dial, so as to have really no reflectivity whatsoever. But the dial is nice. It is just inky, dark, black as night black, and it looks great. We do have a date complication at the 3 o'clock position, and I could live without it. It doesn't look bad. It doesn't throw off the design too much, but it's certainly very simple. It's just, placed there in a window, just to the left of the 3 o'clock marker. It might be cooler if it were a time-only watch, in my opinion, but I'm not going to take any points away from the overall design because of that date complication. I might prefer if it didn't have it, however. Everything else about the dial, including the markers, the logos, it's all just a simple, printed dial. I like that aesthetic. Sure, I enjoy applied markers with high polished metal surrounds or indices. Yeah, an applied logo is cool, but this really does look good, and it meets the aesthetic of a durable, robust tool watch. By and large, I'm sure that's what they were going for. It's largely what they go for in all of the Sinn watches that I have seen. I think that it's fine. It is pretty basic though, and when you start looking at that $1,300+ price point, you kind of wonder, well, could it be a little bit more dressed up? I don't mind it. I like it. I think that it's a great aesthetic. Probably the only thing that I'm not super crazy about on this watch is the handset. It's kind of a pointer, sort of fence post or pencil style, short hour hand and long minute hand. It's got what would appear to be sort of like a powder coat black finish with the highlights of the Luminova luminescence in bright white. Great contrast, very legible. Doesn't really look super impressive. I think if they were going to do anything, kind of give the display or the face of this watch a little bit of a punch, they could have went a step further on the hands. Maybe just instead of that black PVD or powder coat finish, maybe high polish on just the hands. The shape of the hands, not my favorite stylistically, but again, very legible, readable. Presentation is fine, it's great. Overall, the combination of the crystal, the legibility and simplicity of the dial, it is one of my favorites of any of the watches that I've reviewed on the channel. Sure, I have a couple of little complaints or niggles, whatever you'd like to call it. I have them with every watch. Nothing is absolutely perfect. But this is pretty dang close. We see that Sellita SW200 movement ticking away inside the case, through the display case back. The gold, probably bronze, if I had to guess the material. Rotor with the Sinn logo, nice blued screws. The overall presentation of the movement is probably more dressed up than any other part of the watch, and it's certainly not super highly decorated, but it's a nice presentation. Certainly better than your typical utilitarian Seiko movement with their display case backs. Those movements, they're almost downright ugly, if I'm being honest. This is at least pretty pleasant to look at. I like the look of the blued screws quite a bit. It adds just a little something extra. Very nice presentation. This is, of course, the SW200. It's a clone of the ETA 2824-2 movement, legendary movement in its own right. Some people dislike Sellitas because it's not the actual ETA. Frankly, I've never had any sort of problems with a Sellita movement. In my opinion, they're every bit as good as an ETA, and until I find out otherwise through actual experience, I'm going to go ahead and stick with that sort of opinion on the platform as a whole. I've had no problems with them. I'm more than happy to have a Sellita movement or an ETA movement. In this case, this is just fine. The bracelet on this watch is overall outstanding. There's probably one or two small little complaints. We'll get to that, mostly revolving around the clasp. First things first, you probably already noticed we do have drilled or perforated lug holes. So, if you'd like to remove the bracelet, you can do that, no problem. Get the bracelet off, throw it on a leather strap, whatever you want. We'll start here at the end links. The end links are very basic. They are a pivoting or hinged end link design, which is sort of an older style design. I do like that presentation quite a bit. Usually, well, not usually, but quite often you'll have just the T-shaped extended end link. This is recessed and pivoting or hinged. It's a cool design. The H links, very nice. They articulate excellently. You can see that you get all of this level of articulation, so the watch will lay on the wrist very, very nicely. An interesting point, if we look at the screws, it is a screwed link bracelet, not friction pins. But they're, I don't know if you guys can see that on camera very well, they're sort of, what's the word? Hexagonal shaped screws. And I believe the watch comes with the tool necessary to remove those. But a simple flathead screwdriver is not what you would use to remove the links or to replace the screws. It's an interesting take that I've never seen before. It's almost always just a flathead screw. It's cool. I like it. One thing that's annoying about flathead screws is it's really easy to mar up the screw slot or the screw head. Whereas with these, I suspect because of its hexagonal shape and having a specialized tool, probably very simple to change and keeps them in really nice presentation, really good shape. I do like that, yeah, quite a bit actually. The overall finishing, brushed, simple, straightforward, vertical or horizontal, depending on your orientation, brushing, matches up with the finishing on the case very nicely. The only real downside is when we get to the clasp. It's a pretty basic clasp. We got the Sinn logo there, a fold-over safety latch, just a friction lock safety latch, and then the clasp itself, also just a friction lock clasp. We do have a nice high quality machined swing arm, so not that simple, cheap, stamped stainless steel swing arm that you would find on a lot of more affordable watches. But the clasp itself is just kind of that simple pressed metal. It's not a nice machined, high quality, robust clasp. We also only get 3 points of micro adjust on the clasp, and you need to use a spring bar pusher or some little tool to depress the spring bar there to move it forward and backwards to make it a little bit tighter or a little bit looser. There's tons of space there. I'd love to see them add 1, 2, 3 more so that we really have flexibility when it comes to sizing. Since this is such a simple, cheap clasp, they could go that extra step and add that in there. One thing that it does have, which is curious, is a fold-open diver's extension. This is absolutely not a dive watch. I guess since it's a pilot's watch, perhaps you could make the argument that if you're wearing a large, long-sleeved pilot's jacket, that would make it so that you could fit it over your jacket. And I get that, but in reality, nobody really is doing that. So I would prefer to not have that fold-out extension, to have a higher quality machined clasp, and to have at least 1 or 2, if not 3 more micro adjustment points. That would be the ideal. That said, this is perfectly serviceable and not a problem in terms of the overall functionality. I just think at this price point, the quality could go up a step on this clasp. On the wrist, again, my 6 3/4 inch wrist, absolutely 100% knocked out of the park, perfect in terms of the overall size and scale. The scope or geometry, I guess is what I'm looking for, of the case, everything, it's perfect. This is an outstanding watch, and one that I could see being a fantastic everyday kind of daily wear watch for my personal lifestyle. I do absolutely love the way that it looks. I love the way that it fits. I love the way that it rides on the wrist. It's not a 10 out of 10, but it's pretty darn close. I've tried to decide, based on the overall aesthetic, what style watch is this? It feels more like a field watch than a pilot's watch to me. It feels like it's missing some of the hallmarks of a pilot's watch, though I know that the DNA, the history, the heritage from the Sinn company is very much rooted in pilot's watches. But neither is it a traditional field watch. It's certainly just a casual everyday watch. It is most certainly a very robust utilitarian tool watch. But I don't know how to categorize it. It's fantastic, whatever it is. That's for sure. But yeah, I'm not sure what to call it. Let me know in the comments. What do you guys think? What kind of watch is this? Certainly not a dive watch, not a tool watch, or excuse me, not a dress watch. Pilot's watch, kind of, maybe. Field watch, I don't know, I'm not sure. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Well, there you have it, guys, the Sinn 556. All I can say is, what a great watch. But at $1,320, it's certainly venturing out of that entry-level territory. Let's quickly address the question of value for money. How does the Sinn 556 stack up? Personally, I think it stacks up very well and it's well worth the asking price. So I think an issue some people might not be able to get past is that it's a very simple, and some might even say a plain looking watch. Sure, at first glance, it doesn't look super special. And being it's not exactly the most affordable watch on the market, I can see why someone that hasn't seen one in the metal might question the value. Sure, the style of the watch is, by all accounts, a plain Jane, utilitarian tool watch. But for me, that's a huge draw, and it's a big part of the charm. It has all of the features, the functionality, and build quality of a watch that you can put to task, and with its simple design, it looks the part. I think that's a plus, and I do really like it. What about the question from the viewer, Crumply Cowboy? He asked, is it different enough from the Sinn 104 to justify having both? Well, I did a review of the 104 a while back, and it's another watch that I was very impressed with. And I could absolutely see having both of these watches in a collection. Style-wise, I think they're quite a bit different from one another, and I find that there would be very little overlap between the two watches. Both are high quality, well built, and from my perspective, I think they're great looking watches. So yes, I definitely recommend them both to someone that was considering it. Alright guys, that'll do it for this video. Thanks as always for tuning in and watching. Check the description of the video for a list of ways that you can help me out, you can support what I'm doing here on YouTube. There's my Amazon and Audible affiliate links. There's links to my Patreon, and of course all of my social media accounts. Thanks to everyone that has been helping me out and supporting the channel. As always, I do greatly appreciate it. And with all that, I'll wrap this one up, and until the next one, say bye now.